Before we get started, we just wanted to make sure that we shared with you all that for the purpose of this video, we are role-playing. And while the stories that Cindy will share will be real, the report that we're utilizing is not Cindy Adams' report. Many of you have been part of our Leadership Circle community for quite some time, and you know how important confidentiality is to us, and we wanted to honor that even in this video.
Absolutely.
Good afternoon. My name is Aronde Creighton, and I have the privilege of serving as the Vice President of Consulting Services for the Full Circle Group.
And I'm Cindy Adams. I'm Senior Vice President of North America Operations and Organizational Development and People, and we are delighted to be here with you today.
The purpose of our time with you today is to spend some time going over how to conduct a Leadership Circle debrief. And so the first thing that we want to do is walk you step by step through what that process looks like. We'll be using Cindy's LCP from this year. And in preparation for that, I've actually taken the time to go through and review her graph, her comments, and her report in preparation for this time. In doing that, part of that purpose is for me to learn a little bit about Cindy, as well as form my own hypothesis of what may be occurring at this time with her Leadership Circle profile. Once you form that hypothesis, we really want you to suspend that as you go into your time with your individual client.
Be very curious about it when you enter in with your client and allow them to unveil what's really going on.
One of the first things you want to do once you have your client in front of you for their debrief is really take some time to build rapport. That's an important task to go through because this is a very personal and intimate interaction with this particular client. And we want to make sure that they're comfortable sharing who they are, their story, their experience. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to share a little bit about ourselves, as well as just get to know the client that we're working with.
Yeah, it's important to not make any assumptions too that they want to share. So you want to give them some time and space to be able to feel comfortable before you go into any of their data, because it is very personal and very private, and some people don't know how to have those conversations.
So we'd like to demonstrate exactly what that looks like in terms of building rapport with your client. And so Cindy, before we launch into your Leadership Circle debrief, I'd like you to share a little bit about the current role that you occupy at Full Circle Group, what some of those objectives are that you have. And the last question I would say is, what's the leadership challenge that's keeping you up at night right now?
Okay, so I have been a partner in this organization for a long time, but I recently took on this role in operations, and I've only been in the role 6 months. I've been in the organizational development role for about a year. And it's very challenging. We have a lot of transformational initiatives going on, and I really love it. But I would say what's keeping me up at night are many things. Our ability to serve our customer is a huge gap right now in what we're doing and what we need to be doing. And we have technology issues, we have leadership issues, we have resource issues, we have process issues. I mean, you name it, we have issues.
Great, thank you. And that's just one of the ways that we want to build rapport and understand the business context that our client is sharing with us. From there, our next step would simply be to introduce ourselves, make sure that they understand that we're open with who we are and want to make sure that this is an exchange that's happening between yourself, the coach or consultant, and the client.
One of the things that's going to make me open up more as a participant is to hear a little bit from Aronde.
Yes.
So when we do the business context, I kind of want to hear from Aronde what his business context is, as well as I want to know a little bit about him to know if I can even trust him.
So this is how that process would look. Well, Cindy, I really appreciate you taking the time to share with me the current context of your role and some of the challenges that you're having. While this time is going to be spent really focusing on you, I do want to share a little bit about myself and what I do. So I have the privilege of serving as an executive coach and consultant. In that capacity, I work with companies all over the world, specifically using our Leadership Circle profile instrument. My home base is Atlanta, Georgia, and so that's where I make my home. That's very important to me. My wife and my 2 daughters are there. I have 2 teenage daughters, to be specific. That's probably why you see no hair on my head. And I really enjoy the work that I have an opportunity to do, spending time with clients such as yourself.
Thanks for sharing that. What that makes me want to share is a little bit about my family. I want to talk to him about, oh, well, I have 4 kids. I wonder how old your kids are. All of that is just part of the rapport building, and it's really critical. Don't think you can miss it.
Absolutely. we're asking people to really open up and in some cases maybe be vulnerable and transparent in ways that they never have. So the more that we can share and really create that open environment and really pay attention to our tone and delivery with our clients, it just makes it an easier process as they're going through the debrief.
Yep.
Once we've had an opportunity to get to know one another and I understand Cindy's business context, I've shared a little bit about who I am, we want to take that time to then launch into story. As many of you recall during your certification, a story is such a key component to the Leadership Circle. One of the things that Cindy and I both love about the instrument is it not only captures where you stand as a leader now, but it helps you really make the connections of how your life experience is influencing your leadership now.
We're asking our clients to reach back into their past, present, and future, curate some of that, make meaning of some of that, and together that will create an experience and a bond between the two of us into which we can enter the leadership profile in a more open way.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's take a minute to demonstrate what that would look like as we're working with Cindy. So Cindy, again, thank you so much for just sharing kind of the business context and understanding, and hope that I gave you a little snapshot of who I am, and I'm sure we'll get to know each other a little bit more. One of the things that we want to do with the Leadership Circle profile is really understand the connection of your life experience and how it's showing up and shaping some of your leadership today. And in order to do that, what we found is that's very helpful is taking the time to hear your story. And so what I want to do is give you some time to share your story. And the way that we'll do that is really think of this in 3 buckets of time. Early childhood, so really your time up through about the high school years.
Okay.
Where'd you grow up? Who'd you grow up with? What were the activities that were important? What did you enjoy doing? And then from high school kind of to early adulthood. So if you immediately went to college or if you took some time off, those early years, maybe some early mentors, classes that might have been impactful for you that helped shape the direction that you moved into, and kind of those first early career days. And then the last bucket of time would be, let's say, the last 7-8 years of your life. Professional career, personal as well, what you've been focused on, those things that you've been active in. And what I'd also like you to do, if there have been any milestones that have happened through your life. So let's say as an early on, if you moved from the West Coast to the East Coast, or if you unfortunately experienced the loss of a loved one or a friend, something that you know really shaped you as you grew, weave those in throughout the story as well.
Okay, that's a big ask, Aronde. Here we go.
All right.
I'm the oldest of 4 children. Grew up my dad went to law school at UCLA, and I was born at that time. So we were quite poor at that time. He was going to school, and I was the only baby, and then we navigated through that, and my childhood was fairly happy, although demanding, I think. As a oldest child, a lot was expected of me. And as I look at it through high school, things got a lot tougher. So I would say the first 8 years of my life pretty good.
Yeah.
After that, a lot tougher. Big ups and downs with a father who was an entrepreneurial lawyer. So feast and famine both. And my dad was really tough, really a tough guy, tough lawyer. My mom was super passive. So watch that. My job in the family was to take care of the kids when dad would go into a rage and get mad, and find my mom in the closet crying and take care of her. And all that was it was really difficult. We moved to another place when I was in my sophomore year. That was also really hard because then I didn't have any friends, so had to kind of pick up that and carry that on. And I was actually really glad to get out of the house when I went to college. So went to college. College was difficult because it was really big, and I wasn't quite sure who I wanted to be and what I wanted to be, but I did start out in dance, and those classes were a refuge for me. They were great. And I had always liked performing at some level. Like I did well at that as a child. I took a lot of first places and things that I, had participated in. One thing about my mom was she was always a perfectionist, so she would drive in, like she would practice with me how to do things, and she would drive in and make sure I was perfect before I ever went on stage. That kind of carried over into other things where you kind of think that you have to be that way, but it served me for the time to be able to manage those situations, and regardless of what was going on in my life, I knew that I could get up for what I needed to do. Yeah. And I did that through college, and didn't really find myself until I got lucky in a ropes course experience. I was working in a nonprofit group. I really loved the nonprofit group. I was working with homeless people and the marginalized populations, and trying to help them to overcome self-sabotage behaviors. And it was tough, but it was also super rewarding, and so I started doing a lot of experiential stuff even with that group after I was introduced into that. And I started to find passion for leadership, and passion for helping people to rise, and passion for creating a better world than exists for a lot of people out there. So that's kind of a really short nutshell. I think I could answer some questions, but I really found myself, I think, as an adult later on. My parents ended up getting divorced. It was kind of like a train wreck that happened in later adult life, but then I realized that I just needed to stand.
One of the things that's very important is, as a coach, we're here to hold the space. We don't know what experiences our client has had, or if that individual's even shared some of this openly. So really just holding the space, not really getting into a lot of questions other than for clarity purpose, to make sure that you've heard something correctly, is really what I try to steer towards. What about you, Cindy?
Yeah, I feel like Aronde held that space beautifully for me. I have shared some of that story. I didn't know what I was going to share today on camera, and I felt myself getting really emotional. So I knew that I had a safe space and a safe partner for him, and I could have even cried. I chose not to on camera today for you all, but that can happen with your clients, and you need to be able to hold that space big enough for them to break down or have tears or anger or whatever comes up there, because truth is, most of us haven't really explored that in that way until this experience.
Absolutely. And just remember, tears are healing properties, so it shouldn't be something that makes us uncomfortable.
Right.
We just want to be there with our client as they're going through whatever that emotional expression may be. Sometimes, depending on the intensity of the story, you may want to give your client a break and just kind of call a quick time out so that they have an opportunity to kind of compose themselves.
Yeah.
You may find that to be a necessity at times.
Yeah, and I would add here, I'm glad you brought that up, Aronde. Don't feel like you need to take care of them. Just hold the space. So give them a timeout. Don't take that space away. Allow them to just have a breath in it, and they'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So once we finish with the story, and because we've created a space of vulnerability, it's a perfect time to transition into helping our clients understand the model of the Leadership Circle profile. And that's what we transition into after they've had an opportunity to share their story. Once we transition out of story and learning more about our client's experience, we want to make sure they understand the Leadership Circle profile and the framework itself. Remember, at this point, your client is going to be chomping at the bit to get to their actual report and results.
Yeah, they are, and you want to give them an orientation that helps them navigate those results. So it's simple and yet detailed enough that they understand what this really means.
For the purpose of this video, we're using a digital format. You would actually also have access to the PDF to use with your clients as you're going through things digitally on either your computer or your tablet. So let's just demonstrate exactly how we would go through the explanation of the Leadership Circle framework and make sure that we orient our client effectively. All right, Cindy, so let's launch into understanding a little bit about the Leadership Circle framework.
Okay.
You'll notice that you have a circle here on the page.
Yep.
Remember, these are not your results.
Oh, okay.
But I do want to make sure that you understand exactly what you're looking at here.
Okay.
If you think of this as a clock and divide this from 3 to 9 o'clock, the lower half of the circle is all focused on the reactive. The upper half is focused on the creative. When we say reactive and creative, what we're referring to is reactive is where we go when we need our own sense of worth, security, and self-validated. It's a place that we all have gone to at some point, and we've matured hopefully to a point where we realize it's not just us in the world by ourselves, but we reside in this place with others. When we take that we orientation, we're transitioning more into the creative dimension.
Oh, interesting.
All right? So that's what we're talking about when we look at reactive and creative. Inside the circle, you'll notice there's a circle within the circle.
Mm-hmm.
We like to refer to these as dimensions. You can think of them as categories. In the creative, we have 5 dimensions: relating, self-awareness, authenticity, systems awareness, and achieving. The definitions for each of those are on the flip side of this digital document that we're looking at. In the reactive, we have 3 dimensions: complying, protecting, and controlling. Each of those dimensions then break out into a total of 18 competencies in the creative, 11 tendencies in the reactive. Does that make sense so far?
Yep, that makes sense.
Great. You'll also notice that there's some green shading and some dark bolded lines here.
I was wondering about those.
The green shading represents the aggregate of all of your raters. So all of the individuals that you sent the survey to, this is compiling all of their data. And it shows where they have you rated in each of these areas.
Okay.
The dark line represents your self-assessment or self-evaluation. Now, if you remember when you took the survey, it's on a 0 to 5 point scale.
Yep.
We actually take that data and then normalize it to form a percentile. If you think back to your college entrance exams, you fell in the 90th percentile, which meant 89% of people scored lower than you, 10% were higher. That's what we mean when we talk about normalized data.
Okay.
Are you following with that?
Yep.
Okay. So when you see this represented here, it's represented in terms of percentiles. So taking a look in the relating dimension, you can see that this individual's raters had them at what percentile in the relating?
In 30 percentile.
30th percentile. They self-assessed about where?
70.
About the 70th percentile.
So they think they're doing a lot better than their people do.
Absolutely, you hit it on the head. And that's exactly what you're looking at when you take a look at the circle that's here represented. All right? Let me quickly just point out these 4 bars that you see around, and then Cindy will be ready to launch into your actual results.
Okay,
All
can't
right?
wait.
If we start over here on the left, reactive creative scale. If I wanted to take a snapshot and see, is this leader more reactive or creative in their leadership right now? This would be the scale that I would take a look at.
Okay.
You can notice here, their raters have them at what percentile?
Looks like something like 38 percentile.
About the 38th percentile. They self-assess where?
At 75.
So they're seeing themselves a lot more creative than their raters are. And you can see that by where the dark lines are positioned in the creative. All right? So that's what that's measuring as the reactive and creative scale. At the very top, we're looking at a balance between relationship and task. Just as the lower half is the reactive and the upper half is the creative, if we divide this from 12 to 6, the left half is all relationship driven, the right half is all task driven. What we're looking at also here, specifically at the relating and achieving dimensions in the creative, is what we're looking at with this relationship task balance. So you can see by the shading, their raters see them as much more task oriented. They self-evaluate thinking that they're more balanced. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Great. On the right side, we have leadership potential utilization. The best way to look at this, Cindy, is to think if I'm a highly creative leader and I'm balanced between relationship and task, my leadership potential utilization is going to be high.
Yeah.
So think of this almost as a formula. X times Y equals Z.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
The very last measure at the bottom that we're looking at is leadership effectiveness. One of the things that we've always had people asking about is this really tangible as it pertains to business performance? And so a few years ago, we did a study. We pulled out the highest correlated questions. When we look at leadership effectiveness, it's measuring 5 specific questions. I'll show you where those are later, but they would be things such as Cindy is an example of an ideal leader. Our organization is better because of Cindy's leadership. Overall, Cindy is an effective leader. Those 5 questions are captured here in this leadership effectiveness scale.
Okay, and they don't have anything to do with what's in here, just those 5 questions.
They're just measured separately, yes, just those 5 questions.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
That makes sense, Rondé.
Great. Again, we want to quickly go through and give them a high-level understanding, and at the end, we can always refer them back to the reference material that they have.
What I noticed as a participant is it's highly valuable to go over the sample profile before I'm going over my own data. That way I can look at it objectively. I'm really interested in the construct. I love the way Aronde explained it. I can look at it with interest, wondering what mine is going to look like, but I'm really curious about how everything lines up without getting hooked in emotionally myself about my own data and then not being able to hear what Aronde is explaining to me because I'm stuck on one item.
Once we've taken the time to explain the framework of the leadership circle, we really have a client that's excited and eager to dive into his or her own report. So we want to make sure that we immediately launch into that. One of the things that we found over the years is that starting off with the comments is a great way to transition your client into their leadership circle report. Do you want to say some more about that?
I'd love to. It really is. The comments add texture, flavor, color to what can be initially as stark lines and numbers. So getting them the texture and the color and the story that's going on with their people, the people that took the time to comment about them, really helps build their own construct around how people are seeing them. Then when you show them the numbers, they can start to relate and align those really well. It also begins to align the story that we've just shared initially about our life, and so it all can come together at one time in one place.
Absolutely. And so starting off with comments is a great way to launch into the actual review for the first time. And typically our recommendation is to start off with comments, then transition into the graph, because it does give the visual learner that visual diagram that we've just spent some time reviewing. And then from there going into the tables and the specific data and information.
Right.
So let's do that with Cindy with her Leadership Circle profile report. So Cindy, now that you have a basic understanding of the Leadership Circle framework, let's actually take a look at your report.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is start you off on page 11, which is where your feedback comments are going to start.
Okay.
And I'd like you to take a minute to let's read through these comments. You'll see things in what are your strongest leadership assets,
Okay.
maybe some challenges, and then any other additional feedback that folks wanted to provide you with.
Okay.
So Cindy, I want to just really pull your attention into the first sets of comments that you have around some of your leadership assets and skills. And just take a minute to read through and
Okay.
talk to me about the things that jump off the page at you.
Well, I love that this person thinks that I am working on those things that are critical, saying the critical few improvements, keep working on those that have the greatest impact. And it's worrisome to me a little bit that this other person thinks I'm the organizational conscience, but I appreciate I think the sentiment behind that.
What's concerning to you about being the organizational conscious?
Well, I would want it to go way beyond me, and maybe they're thinking that it does, but I just hope that's, I don't know how I feel about that one.
Okay.
But I do like to keep developing trusting relationships with people, and I'm very humbled by the comment that says that I have high integrity. I believe I do, and that's really important to me.
Sure.
And I love the one that says here to keep being so approachable and caring, and how much I care, because I really do care a lot, Aronde.
Yeah. One of the comments that I love when I was reading through was, she doesn't just ask how's the family to make small talk, she cares about them and us. And I think that really does capture some things that are important to you. Even thinking back to the story that you shared about part of your role as the oldest of four was caring for your siblings and checking on your mom and kind of making sure things. So I can see where that family value comes out even in how people are experiencing you as a leader.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It does. It's really important to me.
Great, great. Let's take a look at some of the other comments that you have. You have the things that we want you to keep doing because they're assets of yours, but also some things that maybe might be some challenges that you might want to continue taking a look at and improving. So when you read that first one, doing timid managers dirty work, they need to learn how to do it themselves. What is that? Does that hit you at all?
Yeah, I think I know where that's coming from, and I mentioned some resource issues that we were having and some things that we're working through, and we've had a lot of cleanup to do.
Yeah.
I don't know that I agree with the sentiment of that comment, but I can see that there's, somebody not feeling that I should be handling that, and
Sure.
that I should probably be coaching the leader how to handle that better, maybe.
Sure. And one of the things that the Leadership Circle profile is going to do for you is going to increase your awareness.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, I know that's not something that kind of hits a little bit like,
Yeah.
I don't want to be perceived that way.
Yeah.
But at the same time, now that you have that awareness, it may be something that you have your antenna up regarding.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. This one hurts too a little bit on I have close relationships with some and not on the other, and kind of a perception of favoritism. So that's a good awareness for me. I'm actually glad that person wrote that down, so I can pay more attention to that, because I feel like I'm friendly to everybody, but naturally you're going to be closer to some than others.
Absolutely.
But that's an important one for me to be careful of.
And so what's going to happen a lot of times as people are providing verbatim comments and feedback, there may be something that kind of feels like it just stands out a little bit. One of the things as we go through more of your report that I would encourage you to do is to have conversations with those people that did complete the survey for you. And so that who those individuals are that you invited, and at your convenience and when it's comfortable for you, you may want to sit down and begin to have some conversation and share some of this with them. And perhaps in doing that, you might find the person that's made that comment who can give you specific examples of when that might have happened.
Yep, that's helpful.
Now that we've had an opportunity to review the comments with our client, we want to transition into their actual graph, making sure that they have a chance to see the visual representation of their Leadership Circle profile report. One of the things that we want to do is just see what draws their attention. Where is it that their eyes go first? Whether it's in the creative or the reactive or the gaps between their self-evaluation and the evaluation of others.
What surprised them about what they see, what they like about what they see, what disturbs them about what they see. Notice where your client goes. It will give you an indication right off the bat about who they are and what they look for.
One of the things that's also important is to provide the balance. And so you may have some clients that will immediately look at the reactive or where they rated themselves so much lower and see that as negatives. An opportunity that exists there would be to point out where they're rated very high in some of the creative competencies.
You really want to make sure you spend time with their strengths, because strengths are things that they are natural at generally, or at least they've fine-tuned some of those things over time. And amplifying those can be an unlocking move, just as addressing a so-called reactive tendency or style can be an unlocking move. So as a coach to a client in this profile, it's important that you help them hone in on a few areas before they just focus in on one.
And again, this is why it's important for you as the coach to take the time to review their graph and their report prior to the actual debrief session. One of the other things, just to remind you of your original certification, is to look at some of the gaps that might exist as well. Remember, from our perspective at Leadership Circle, 20 percentile points is a significant gap, either under or over evaluating in any of the tendencies or competencies.
And what we mean by significant gap is that's a blind spot for that client. So generally, if it's 20 or 30% over, it may be there, but I, as the client, don't see it. So you will have responses like, I don't understand that, I don't see that, I don't know why they would be saying that. That would be an indication that they have a blind spot.
Great. So let's do this. We're going to kind of transition to your graph so that you can see what your profile looks like. And there's your graph.
Okay. Based on what you told me before, I can see that I've got some gaps in a couple of areas. Like I think have more integrity than other people are saying I do. That jumps out at me.
Yeah, and so let's use integrity as an opportunity. One of the things that's always important is to reground yourself in the definitions that we use at Leadership Circle. And so when we talk about integrity here, what we're talking about is, as a leader, are you walking the talk? Mm-hmm. It's not so much trustworthy in the organization, we feel like we can trust you at the company that you're working in, but If you say that there are certain values that you espouse and that you live up to, do people see you walking that out? Okay? And so you notice that there is a little bit of a gap between how you see yourself and how others see you in that particular area. The question I would ask you is, do your folks know those things that are very important to you?
Well, I thought they did, but they might not, based on this graph.
Again, just another piece of information and something else that you might want to explore with your colleagues a little bit later.
Yeah.
What else do you notice as you look at your graph specifically, Cindy?
I can see that this graph tells me that I don't have a relationship task balance, so I'm having more stuff on the relationship side, which makes sense to me. I'm trying to please a lot of people. I'm trying to, clean up a lot of things with people, and I'm really worried about our people, and I just spend a lot of time with people.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you can see that. As you mentioned, you've been in this operations capacity for about 6 months, and this is a new space. And so there's a lot of getting to know people, getting to know the processes. And so sometimes we can spend more time on the relationship side versus the achieving and the task-oriented side.
Yeah.
Okay? Definitely see that there. You mentioned a lot of pleasing, and I wanted to draw your attention to the complying down here.
Oh, yeah.
And people are seeing you a little bit higher in that space. Any thoughts as you look at your complying in the reactive dimension?
Well, I totally get the pleasing.
Okay.
In fact, if that's my line, I feel like I can see that.
Okay.
That I really am trying to make sure everyone's happy. I talked about that in my childhood thing, trying to make sure everybody's okay, make sure I still do that today.
Yeah.
I am surprised a little bit by that people are seeing me a little more passive than I feel like I am, or I don't know on the belonging, but I'm surprised by the passive. But I can totally see how I spend my time on the people side, so that part I get. And I'm pretty happy about this up here on the relating side, though.
Yeah.
That feels good to me.
And it should. And one of the things I think on your relating is that you self-assess a little bit lower. And usually when we see those kind of gaps, people are wanting more of you in that capacity. They want you to do more mentoring and developing. They want you to really collaborate and create that team environment because they are getting those things from you. So just step more into that space and be comfortable with it.
Okay.
As you mentioned, just from your childhood, the pleasing, taking care of your siblings, making sure everything in the house is okay, having a very demanding father. You can see how some of that can get colored there.
Yeah.
Okay?
I can.
And then I would also say with just this new role, OD is an easy space for you. Operations is new. And so sometimes just maybe being in a space where I don't really know what I need to do.
Yeah.
Or what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Might draw some of that passive. People may take it as passive, where perhaps what you're seeing is, I need to just take a step back and make sure I know everything that's going on first. Does that resonate at all with you?
Yeah, that could be it. I think I am a little bit cautious, maybe overly cautious right now in some areas, where other areas I'm not. So maybe that would be coming into play.
Yeah. And one of the things that I would say that there's an opportunity to offer some balance there is because people do see you in this collaborative and mentoring and developing space, instead of spending so much energy being passive and kind of waiting until you have all the information, maybe have more trust and connect with them and ask for their feedback. That might be a way for you to shift the focus from this passive and complying space into more of the genuine relating, which is something that sounds like it's very comfortable for you.
Yeah, that feels comfortable for me. I think I can do that.
Great. Once we've had an opportunity to spend time looking at the graph and analyzing it, the last step in the debrief process from a report perspective would be to actually go into the tables and take a look at the specific data and information, especially by category.
And by category means you've got your breakouts with boss, boss's boss, peers, direct reports, and others. So this gets very interesting for our client to see how they're managing up, how they're managing across, how they're managing down. Those are critical points, data points.
Absolutely. And as a coach, you may find that there are some significant differences between how the boss and the peers see this individual versus direct reports. And that can be an opportunity for you to call out even deeper understandings and information that's housed within the report. Let's just say, for example, that's in Cindy's report, we actually saw that her direct reports rated her extremely high in the creative and low in the reactive, but it was the reverse with her boss and her peers. A question I may want to ask her is, what's the relationship like with your peers and your boss in this new opportunity that you're working in? That might open up and unlock some keys for her to realize that she's interacting with people differently.
The great thing when that happens, and this is a coaching tip for you all, when I am managing, let's say, direct reports really well, that tells the client that they know how to do this.
Absolutely.
That they know how to be creative, that they know how to lead. If they're having a difficult time with their boss, they need to be able to transport what they're doing really well with their directs and think about that in the context of their boss. So there's many coaching moves that you can work with in these breakouts.
Absolutely. So Cindy, I know that we've gone through your comments, we've taken a look at the graph, a lot of information, a lot of data.
Yeah.
The last thing that I want us to spend some time on is to actually look at the scoring by your different categories.
Okay.
You'll notice that you had a total of 16 evaluators complete the survey for you.
Which I was really happy about. I was happy
Yes.
that I got 16.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I normally try to aim for between 15 to 18 is great.
Yeah.
12 to 15 is enough solid data for you to really be able to pull some information from that.
Yeah.
All right? And so as we're looking through, you can notice that we have a breakdown by your boss, your peers. Unfortunately, only 2 of your direct reports completed it, so their information is included in aggregate and then
Okay.
others. And so just taking a look at the different categories, what do you notice different between your boss and your peers in terms of how those individuals are experiencing you as a leader?
Well, I can see some areas where my boss was pretty tough on me, like relating, which is pretty high in the overall graph, is a medium category here at 57, but my peers and others rated me pretty high there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if she just doesn't know what kind of work I'm doing, or
Right.
if I'm not doing enough relating with her. What would you advise me on about
Well, and that was the question that I was going to ask is what is the interaction and how frequently is that interaction in place between you and your boss?
Yeah, I would say it's mainly just meetings and a few phone calls.
Okay. And as opposed to with your peers and the others, are those individuals that you may meet with outside of the typical conference call environment?
Yeah, and a lot of those are in the office, so we're meeting in the hallway, and I talk with them regularly, so maybe that's it.
And it could be, that might be an opportunity for you to have more personal connection with your boss.
Okay,
All right?
yeah.
What else do you notice?
Well, some of these, like systems awareness, my boss and others kind of rated me low, so there's something to look at there.
Sure.
I can see though that the complying is that pleasing, and others is pretty high with my peers too. So there's just, I think there's a lot of data for me to soak in.
There is. And not that you have to get into it right now, but what I do want to point out to you is that we just looked at everything from a dimensional level.
Mm-hmm.
You can go further into the report and see it by competency and tendency as well.
Okay.
So for example, you mentioned the whole systems awareness.
Mm-hmm.
If we take a look a little bit deeper in systems awareness, you can see specifically community concern is one that you're high in.
Mm-hmm.
But the one that you seem to be the lowest in is around systems thinker with your boss.
Oh wow, that's low.
Okay.
And with others, yeah.
Absolutely. And
That's something for me to really dig into.
It is.
I need to talk with my boss about that one.
It is. And something else for you to know is if you flip over to the very next page, you have the questions that form that systems thinker.
Oh, that's helpful.
I reduce activities that waste resources. I redesign the system to solve multiple problems simultaneously. I evolve organizational systems until they produce envisioned results. Those will be the 3 questions that your boss and others responded to. They got those scores.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Did that give you a little bit more context and understanding?
Yeah, I understand that now. I think maybe too, there's so much that I'm taking on right now with those things that we haven't yet seen results there.
Absolutely.
So maybe that's driving into it too. But these are some really good areas for me to dig into.
Good. And just know that you have the questions not only in the creative but in the reactive as well. So if you want to dig in a little bit deeper, all that information is there for you.
Okay,
All right.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Now we've had an opportunity to go through comments, graph, and the table. And so your client has now seen their entire report. At this point, we want to leave them with some type of assignment or follow-up and follow-through. With that, what's important is also to make sure that they are keenly aware of the resources that they have at their disposal if that individual wants to dig deeper. Just remember, not everyone is going to process right there on the spot with you. And I think it's important for us to recognize that we might have some introverted processors. And so pointing out the fact that they have the profile interpretation manual, all of the definitions at their disposal as they dig deeper is really valuable for them to know and hear.
The most important thing you can do in this setting actually is point them to the resources they have. You noticed if a Rhonda were to take a cue from me when I said, oh, that's something I really will have to dig into. Oh, that's something I need to think about and understand. I'm giving my coach cues that I need to process.
Yeah.
And there is a process in soak time. So I'm going to want to look at this by myself. I'm going to want to go to that guide, and I may go to Systems Thinker and really understand what that means. And so pointing me to those resources is great. And then I'm going to look to Rhonda for what happens next.
Absolutely. One of the things that we want to slow our clients down from doing is jumping into do and fix mode. Many people will receive this information and immediately want to fix it. And as I like to say a lot of times, they need to give themselves the space and grace to sit with the data and the information.
Yeah.
And for that reason, it's great for you as a coach, if you can, to set a follow-up appointment, hopefully within 7 days, if not at least within 2 weeks of the debrief. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree. It's great to get back quick, so you give them a quick assignment that they can process and think through and accomplish, and then get back together.
Cindy, what are some of the assignments that you like to give people as a follow-up on the debrief?
So one of the assignments I love to give, and this I think originally came from Steve Athey a while back, which is a reactive awareness exercise. So you noticed my pleasing on this graph was pretty high. So I would ask a client in this situation that's also curious about that to start noticing all the time in the day that they are worried about pleasing somebody, to get painfully, acutely aware of their pleasing. And liken it to walking outside. If I walk outside, I'll just see what's there.
Yeah.
But if I have an assignment to walk outside and notice everything that's red, now I'm going to look for everything that's red. The bright red, the kind of red, the red with the orange shade, and I'll start noticing everything in vibrant color. We want them to do that with reactive too.
Absolutely.
So now I'm going to start to notice, oh, it's in meetings, and oh, it's in one-on-ones, and oh, it's even at home. Now I'm more aware. So that's a great exercise.
Absolutely. And keep in mind the personality and style of your client. Some people may feel comfortable journaling that information.
Yeah.
Some of them may want to use technology and utilize their tablet or their phone to just kind of capture that. You really want to know the situation, the circumstance that it comes up, so that as a coach, you can make sure that you're able to effectively work with that individual on those reactive areas.
Yeah. Another assignment would just be to go over all the data, to process it, to remind them of the change curve, that after this they may get a little discombobulated. Yeah. They may get a little angry. They may start to pick out those comments and say, I know that was Bob that said that, and I am so mad right now. To normalize all that for them, that they'll go through that process. And that you're there for them as a resource in that anger, and then in the next level of acceptance, to give themselves some space and time for all those emotions that they go through. And then another assignment is one on the creative you could do if they're ready for it, which in this situation on Systems Thinker is to just understand what it means to be a systems thinker, to talk with others about that, to read the manual about that, to be prepared to explore that more if that's a lever that they really want to begin to unlock, or if maybe there's something else that's going to come first before that one.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You know, Cindy made the comment earlier during our debrief that we're not here to so much take care of our client. And so just understand that at the end, after reading through these comments and seeing everything, there might be a plethora of emotions going up. Again, normalizing that and making sure they understand that this is normal. Sometimes using your own experience as a coach. I've done 2 leadership circle profiles. I sometimes always refer to my first one that I don't remember the 2 days after I got my feedback, right? And that's okay,
Yeah.
because we come back to it and we have an opportunity to grow and develop from there.
We want to thank you for watching this video. We hope it was beneficial to you and you can access this anytime you want.
Thank you for being part of our beloved community, and we look forward to seeing you sometime soon.
Bye now.